The State of Qatar is providing humanitarian assistance to KwaZulu-Natal today, and several ministers are at King Shaka International Airport to welcome the delegation. eNCA's senior reporter Dasen Thathiah is covering the story for us and joins us now live. Dasen, we spoke to you earlier on where you got a chance to speak to the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, updating us on the latest death toll. Take us through those figures.
That's right, Heidi, but I think I'll also just give you a disclaimer right up front here. We are waiting for that press briefing to take place. This would include the Premier, as well as other ministers that were here to receive the humanitarian aid from Qatar. But prior to this, we did have an opportunity to speak to the Premier. We spoke on a number of issues. One of those was the issue of the death toll. We know that that has gone up during the week. It was difficult to confirm those numbers. The last conversation we had earlier in the week, the Premier was telling us back then that they had only known of one person that had washed away. Those numbers have now gone up significantly, but one must also bear in mind that it includes the death toll from the April floods. Now, the concerning factor is how many people are still missing. But beyond all of that and the loss of life here, Heidi, there's also the issue around the displaced, those that are in the shelters. So while he says that there aren't many more people that are now in those shelters, there's still the issue of those that are there from the earlier floods in April and what's happening to them. Not all of them have been moved, only a small number of them have been placed in temporary shelter. So the question is, how quickly are they going to move to ensure that the rest of them get out of there and get to a safe place to live in?
And we do know that support has come through from the Qatar government. What has the Premier said about this humanitarian aid and support coming through? We would imagine that all hands on deck and any kind of support for the province of KwaZulu-Natal is needed at this stage.
Most definitely, and it continues to be. Even just immediately after the April floods, we saw lots of support coming in, even from within our own country, from other provinces, and I think that was really the start of it. But there continues to be a need here for this type of aid, especially in areas that have not been reached or where there's an ongoing need for urgent supplies, be it food, be it other needs for families that now don't have anything as a result of losing all they've had during those floods. The Premier says that this was a welcome move from Qatar, and just a short while ago we saw the delegation on the airside of the King Shaka International Airport, where that military plane had come through from Qatar offloading what looks like tons of humanitarian aid. So we did have an opportunity to get a little more information from the Premier during that conversation. Let's listen into what he had to say to us.
The humanitarian support, which talk to various things that are required when people are affected by flood disasters. The support came through the Qatar government, reaching out through the Minister of Foreign Affairs in South Africa, and then they coordinated with us. But you will know that we've been working hard to establish the relationship with Qatar and other countries. That's why even here there is a daily flight between Qatar and King Shaka International Airport. We are trying to ensure that, or we've been trying to ensure that we build good relationship with various countries, especially at an economic front. And we are inspired that they felt that they should come and assist us during this time of need.
Now, Dasen, I know you've had an extensive discussion and focus on KwaZulu-Natal with our colleague Thulasizwe Semelani, but many lives have been disrupted, destroyed, and many are still trying to pick up the pieces. Infrastructure has been completely damaged, and we do know that there is a briefing that's set to be underway where you are right now. I guess, you know, what South Africans are waiting for, especially the people of KwaZulu-Natal, are waiting to hear what the plan of action is, because many are saying there hasn't really been a plan, and a lot still remains devastated and not fixed.
Definitely, Heidi, and I think a lot of the concern has been around how quickly government has moved during this period. I mean, we did see delegations on the ground immediately after the floods, but when we talk about things like rehoming the homeless, when we talk about the rebuilding of roads and infrastructure, that's where some of the concern lies. We also know that there has been a public perception around what would go wrong, about how these funds would be spent. So lots of anxiety, if I could call it that, from the public, but I think more so from those that are directly affected. The Premier and government had told us earlier this week that the recent rains last week have in no way helped the province that is currently trying to recover. In fact, it has set us back, and that is a huge concern for the province. In fact, now we're going to need even more money than we needed initially. And on that topic of money, I also did speak to the Premier about what's happening with those funds. The 1 billion rand that was promised to KwaZulu-Natal to assist as part of this disaster. We've been told now that the provincial government has done its part and it's applied, it's done all of the necessary paperwork, but hopefully today and during this briefing we'll be able to get a response to how quickly that money will now be released. It will be broken up into various portions. Some of it will go towards housing, for example, other parts will go towards infrastructure, and that's how that money will be spent. The Premier also giving an assurance that it will be spent in the right way. So one hopes that that will in fact be the case, Heidi, with the track record of this country.
Certainly, Dasen, and it's so sad that we have to sit and question every single cent that is being spent, especially in a disaster that we saw in KwaZulu-Natal. I'm just keen to know, Dasen, from your understanding, I know you say more details going to come out in this briefing that's expected in the next few minutes. I see you keep glancing to look whether or not they are set to begin, so just cue me if you need us to stop at any points. But from your understanding, do you know if money has indeed been given to the province? Because when I was there about 2 weeks ago, the Deputy Mayor of eThekwini, Philani Mavundla, saying they are just working with the budgets that municipality has at this stage, because the national budget that's been given for this disaster has still not been allocated.
So the sense that we also get is that work has to be done. So where where these repairs, for example, need to be done, and where housing needs to be found for people that are in need of it, those existing budgets will be used, and that money that comes from national government in this instance will replenish those funds. So it's a case of trying to get the work done with what is available right now, but at the same time then getting that money to replace that, and that's where that 1 billion comes in, and those grants that are required for this work. So to be fair, we've seen a lot of this work actually starting to take place. We've seen some of the roads being rebuilt, some of the damaged infrastructure, but this has now been compounded because, as I said, where we saw some repairs taking place, that has now been undone in some cases, and now that means, for example, some roads now need bigger repairs, and that would require the process to be re-looked at and reassessed. If you look at areas like Umdloti, we were there, and I think you would remember the visuals, Heidi, of how dramatic that was, especially on the sea-facing side, on that dune where many of the buildings are. Over there, we were with the mayor, Mkholisi Kaunda, when he announced the contractors that would be starting work there, and they in fact had started as early as this week. So residents had lots of questions over how this infrastructure would be rebuilt, how the soil would be secured, but they were given an assurance that when it is rebuilt, it's not going to be a temporary measure, because you'd understand that there are fears over this happening again. So they've been assured that when work begins, it would be more in a long-term sense of securing that area to ensure, hopefully, that this doesn't happen again, or that they are not as badly affected the next time around.
Certainly, and Dasen, I think the other big issue, I'm not sure if you've managed to get any indication as to how far repairing some of those sewage pipes and water pipes that were completely damaged during the floods, because we were on the ground, you yourself and the rest of the team, where many areas are not going to have water for some time. For example, the Tongat area, that water plant has been completely washed away, and it's going to take about 5 to 8 months to be repaired. So there also is a huge crisis that is currently being unfolded, and the government needing to address that as urgently as possible.
You, in fact, covered that the issue of the sewage pipe in the Avoca area, Heidi, and we went back there this week because we were told that work had begun, and we saw that for ourselves. So that has been prioritized. You know what a mess that was. So that has now been one of the areas that has been prioritized, and there is a focus on that. Talking about Tongaat, we just received an update from the eThekwini municipality just today saying that there is a bit of good news for Tongaat, where some of the residents there are starting to receive a little bit of water. Some of the areas in those, some of the residents in those areas and the surrounding areas of Tongaat will be able to receive some of that water. And there's also been a warning that, look, it may be intermittent for now, but I guess it's a step in the right direction, and it comes a little bit sooner than that initial forecast. I think it was something like 5 or 6 months initially that we were told. So there is that kind of work that has been done to move towards a point where residents will now get a full supply of water, because some of the damage that we've seen over this period of time has been damage that will have long-term effects on residents of eThekwini.
Certainly, Dasen, and we just hope that there will be no further devastation in KwaZulu-Natal, because it's just been devastation after devastation. It seems as though your briefing is not happening yet, so we'll be checking in with you as soon as that briefing kicks off. But thank you for that update, our senior reporter, Dasen Thathiah.